Hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Inside the Circle, the Marist Circle student newspaper's broadcast on campus and national issues. Taking our reporting to the next level, we aim to create a space to discuss the issues pertinent to our Marist community and the world at large. I'm Sarah Lynch, features editor of the Marist Circle. We are eager to kick off our very first episode with such a relevant and pressing story, featured in this week's upcoming edition of The Circle. Black History Month at Marist was honored with guest speakers and an art gallery and even a Valley Cafe meal. Many of these events were spearheaded by cultural clubs like the Black Student Union and ARCO. We had the opportunity to sit down with these students and hear about their challenges and triumphs at Marist. These students brought unique stories to the table, but an underlying theme persisted. Each had experienced embedded racism on the Marist campus. In the classroom, these students struggled with representation fatigue, and professors frequently asking them to speak on behalf of the Black community. They discussed racial profiling and incidents of security asking them to show their Marist IDs while walking around campus. As a result of alleged racial profiling in the McCann Center last semester, Director of Safety and Security John Blaisdell announced that Marist security officers will be undergoing cultural sensitivity training in the near future. More to come on this topic in Thursday's edition of The Circle. But first, let's hear directly from the students represented in our pieces on Black History Month. Sitting with Marist Circle Editor-in-Chief Alyssa Hurlbut.
So we are here with Randy Paul, and Randy hails from Huntington Station, New York. So with his parents being from Haiti, Randy is a first-generation American, and he has frequently struggled with a sort of systemic racism throughout his life. So we sat down to talk with Randy about his experiences navigating college as a football player, a Black student, and an entrepreneur. So, Randy, when we spoke earlier, you talked a lot about your upbringing, A, as a first-generation American, and B, coming from Huntington Station. And you said that played a very formative role in your life. So can you kind of describe your upbringing?
My parents always taught me hard work, and to dream as high as I can. So it's an honor to actually be on this campus because people from my neighborhood, they're either lost souls or they're committed to violence or drugs. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting because by any standard, you're very successful. I would say so, just by coming here to Marist and being a Division I athlete and being an entrepreneur and everything in between. So how was it that you kept that mentality to keep your head down, I guess, and to value your education, being surrounded, I guess, by so much, as you mentioned, crime, or it being easy to fall into maybe not the ideal path?
So when I was in the 6th grade, me and my cousin and our friends, we made a pact together that no matter what, we would go to college and we become student athletes. We would use athletics as a ticket to get to where we really want to be. And now I'm a junior in college and I play Division I football. I have friends that run track at Texas A&M. I have friends that play basketball at Cortland. So we're all somewhere that we said we would be years ago. So that's what kept us grounded, that if we come together and we stay strong for each other, then we could do astronomical things.
Yeah, and you have. You started your own clothing brand in addition to your schoolwork and being a Division I athlete. So can you kind of talk about that?
So the Jiggy Crew was started by me because when I was going through junior college, my freshman year, I wanted to bring all of my friends together because we all have dreams of becoming athletes. So what we did was damn, I gotta stop doing that, sorry. What we did was I created a brand for a self-identity so we can be different. We could be the jock, we could be the nerd, like we're us. And it was just a way for me to inspire kids in my neighborhood that you could do whatever you choose, just come together and do it. And then I also wanted to create an opportunity for me to go back to Haiti, so I raised funds and sold clothing so I can go back to Haiti and give out backpacks filled with school supplies to the kids from the same neighborhood that my parents are from and my grandparents are from.
Can you describe that experience going back to Haiti?
The experience was amazing because that area, those kids could have been me if my grandfather didn't come here in the 60s, if my father didn't come here in the 80s, if my mother didn't come here in the 90s. I could have been those people. But my grandfather, he took a chance and he ran with it. And he doesn't regret it at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess transitioning to Marist, coming from where you came from, and Marist being a relatively homogeneous population of students, improving, I suppose, depending on your perspective. But what was that transition like, and what has been your experience here at Marist?
The transition wasn't too hard because I went to high school that was predominantly the same as Marist. And my high school taught me how to be an individual, but also understand the game that's being played at Marist. And when I came to Marist, my transition wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be, but I also had to always stay confident within myself. So there were times my freshman and sophomore year where I've been tested by faculty and by just the climate of the campus, but I had to persevere through it and I had to rejuvenate my confidence every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When we spoke earlier, you talked of soft racism on
Yeah.
the Marist campus. Can you sort of describe what you mean by that and maybe some of the encounters you've had?
So as a black man on this campus, as a black athlete on this campus, most people would view us as just a jock, someone that's here only because we had an opportunity to play a sport, not knowing that we are here because we use it as a ticket. So the soft racism that I'm describing is certain people or certain faculty believe that we are inadequate to fulfill the same responsibility as our counterparts. And some people don't even believe that we should even be here because we didn't work hard enough to be here. So.
Do you feel like you're always having to prove yourself?
Always. But I don't use that as an excuse. I'll keep going.
Mm-hmm. Do you think being an athlete in college gives you, I guess, a platform to be able to speak out about these issues or to be sort of an activist on
Yes.
campus? Do you think, do you feel pressure or an obligation almost to speak out about these issues that you encounter?
Yes, yet it's not because I'm an athlete. I think I owe it to my father and my grandfather because they went through so many things, and they didn't have a platform to speak on it. They just went through it. So if I have the opportunity to speak up about what I went through, the energy's coming from the people before me that didn't get the chance to speak on it. I'm here to speak on it.
Yeah. Do you think there's a tendency of athletes on the Marist campus and beyond to, I guess, turn a blind eye to these issues because they don't want to speak out or they don't want to stand out or be different?
Yes, I believe that because most athletes, they don't want to feel the pressure other than their sport, because you can get ridiculed for speaking out, for doing things, for standing on that platform. It's kind of like the LeBron James shut up and dribble, like, what do you know? You are not allowed to speak on this because you aren't educated on this topic. What would you understand what you're going through?
Yeah. And you never felt that?
I have, but I don't let it define me. I keep going. I will work on my semantics on how I will deliver it, but the message will still be heard.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the final question to wrap up, do you think that Marist is improving? Because it talks about diversifying, welcoming the most diverse freshman class. And it talks about, in our strategic plan to place diversity and inclusion as a priority. Do you see that actually manifesting in the college culture, or do you think the culture is still exclusive?
I think it's changing rather quickly because I personally believe with our new president, he's laying down the foundation for our voice to be heard. Because if I'll be honest, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have the confidence to go out and seek out and speak on what I believe in.
Yeah.
Because when I see someone like that in a position of power, I feel compelled to say something. So I believe the climate is changing, the foundation is being set, and the legacy is being left. So even if I'm gone, we're all gone, what we did before is still gonna resonate.
Absolutely. Well, Randy, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
I
you very
really
much.
appreciate it. And thank you guys for tuning into Inside the Circle, and we will be back with our next episode very soon.
What's your story?
Yeah, so Jack McElduff. I'm a senior here at Marist, and I've been sports editor of the Marist Circle since January of last year.
So what originally drew you to joining the Circle when you came back from abroad? What got you there?
Yeah, I mean, I did newspaper all throughout high school, and I spent the first 2 years at Marist kind of exploring like other ventures and exploits with radio and other things. But by the time I got back, I kind of had the itch to kind of get back into it, and there was a spot open, and I just decided to take it, and I'm glad I did. It worked out.
So looking back on the Circle, do you have like an all-time favorite article that stands out that you've written?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been on staff for too long. I joined when I got back from abroad last year as a junior, but I would say my favorite article that I wrote was the introductory press conference for John Dunn, the men's basketball coach. It was cool kind of getting to see that whole ordeal kind of play itself out and to see the kind of impact he's had on the team and the campus. It's been kind of cool to watch. It's cool to be part of that at the beginning.
Do you plan on continuing a lifestyle of writing for a living after college when you graduate? What plans do you have in mind right now?
I would love to. It's not the most lucrative industry for a young professional, but I would love to keep doing what I'm doing it well, and hopefully doing it for a long time.
The many issues affecting Marist are by no means isolated. The stories our reporters pursue often contribute to a greater national dialogue surrounding hot-button topics. We want to take the opportunity to delve deeper into the diverse stories we publish and facilitate a more open discussion with students. Here at the roundtable tonight, we have some really awesome panelists who we're so excited to have to join us. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Steven Ciravolo. I'm the president of Red Fox Films, as well as one of the founding members of Red Fox Real Talk. I'm also a sophomore.
I'm Jack McElduff. I'm a senior and the co-sports editor of the Marist Circle. Pleasure to be here. I'm John Rohr. I'm a sophomore, and I anchor the MCTV sports show Halftime on the Hudson.
Great, so I think we're going to delve right into our topics here. So we've covered a lot of hot button issues for the Marist Circle, especially in this edition. So one of the things we touched on is this upcoming US presidential election, and they're already gearing up. So controversial issues are once again coming to the forefront on social media and in the news. One of our writers, Joseph Perota, spoke more on this topic in an article called "Sandy Hook is More Than a Talking Point." He wrote that political figures should not use tragedies as campaign moves, calling out Kamala Harris and Barack Obama for leveraging things like Sandy Hook shooting as a way to push forward gun control agendas. So to start this conversation, have you seen or heard any of these comments that the politicians use to sort of integrate tragedies or national issues in order to push forward their agendas or to essentially gain publicity and to resonate with their constituencies? And what do you think, I guess, about the appropriateness of using things like Sandy Hook to push forward a legislative agenda?
Well, what is their problem exactly with politicians using this as a talking point for their campaigns? What's wrong with that?
So the writer of this article felt that because all these politicians are using like Sandy Hook to push gun control agenda, that they're losing actually like the tragedy of the event, and that the people who, like the lives lost, are really just pawns that are being used to gain political points. So.
Yep, so I just think it's incredibly dangerous to kind of turn a blind eye and say nothing should be done about it and it shouldn't be touched on. I think it's something that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, it's going to continue to happen again and again, as we've seen 6 years on now. I don't think much has changed.
Yeah, I agree. If it's an issue that's occurring, there shouldn't be anything wrong with bringing it up because it's not using Sandy Hook, for example, as an opportunity to bring up something such as gun control. It's simply pointing out an issue and solutions to solve it. If you don't point out these issues, then you're neglecting the problem, and therefore you're not creating solutions.
Even
Yeah.
just like beyond just gun control, something that has come up like in our discussions about it, have been, people who use 9/11 as, an example of why, we shouldn't let people from other countries come into the United States, the danger of like different immigrant populations coming in. So, what's the appropriateness of like using, a terrible tragedy like 9/11, the most deadly terrorist attack on American soil, to, and using that for their own political agendas? Is it natural just because it's one of the biggest things that ever happened in our country, or is it, foul play?
Yeah, I think part of what politicians tend to do is they bring out a hot, heavy issue that's currently going on right now. So you have 9/11, right? Mm-hmm. So if you bring up an issue like that, part of it is that's 1 in a million that happens. Mm-hmm. It's not like something that's occurring continually. But they use these topics as a way to talk about an overarching thing that they want to solve. So you could say that these situations that occur are anecdotal. However, they are just a talking point, a larger talking point, in order to grab people's attention. I think that's an important thing to do. So speaking from our event, Red Fox Real Talk, we actually brought up Colin Kaepernick. So he's using his platform as an opportunity to talk about something bigger. So this similar to what politicians are using, they're using these larger situations, and they might be exploiting it. You don't really know what they're going to be doing, but I don't think there should be anything wrong as far as getting people's attention for important issues.
So
I would just say that certain events that happen, whether it be Sandy Hook or 9/11 or any of those things, I think politicians have a general understanding that the people they represent, it's easier for them to understand these issues based on the events that they watch on TV every day, whether it be live coverage of the event or news coverage after. So I feel like that's sort of their way of getting their opinions and their thoughts on these important issues out, is by sort of relaying those tragedies to from the American people back to their political agendas, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough issue too, because these painful tragedies can galvanize so much support in some cases, like 9/11, where Bush was able to kind of garner that pain and that anger from the American citizens in order to push forward his campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. And those wars in and of themselves were controversial, just given, questions as to why we were there, what we were doing there, and using 9/11 to constantly make people remember, oh, we're in pain, we're angry, and not really question his authority. So I think it's interesting. And you mentioned Red Fox Real Talk, and that's something we actually also wanted to touch on as well, because from what we understand, that is a new program put in place on the Marist Campus to talk about deeper issues or controversies, or I guess just have a platform for students to express their sentiment on issues ranging from national politics, like you were talking about Colin Kaepernick, to even on-campus sources of frustration. And so can you kind of delve a little bit into that?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, the point of Red Fox Real Talk is to share with students the certain issues that exist, whether it be domestically or globally. A lot of people, they aren't aware of the issues that are in the world. And if they are, it's important for people to understand people's opinions. So in the news, you'll hear maybe one person talking about their opinion on a situation, but it's important to have an understanding from someone of your peers, because you have a tendency to listen to people who you are familiar with. So the whole point of this is to hear people's opinions on specific topics, to grow their own knowledge of a situation, to become more aware, to become more knowledgeable, as well as to create their own opinions from this. So just myself, we talk about issues that I thought I was familiar with, and I soon realized, based on hearing people's anecdotes and opinions on a situation, that there's more to it than I'm actually seeing. And it makes people more aware of what's going on, and it brings up topics that people might not even know exist.
That is, I was reading the article about your new program, and that you had 31 students show up for the first meeting. So obviously there is an interest. Yeah. But and this goes to the entire panel, do you think that Marist is a community that is really conducive for these controversial, like, political arguments, or do you think that the students are even politically aware or active enough to take part in these discussions?
I think based on our first meeting that we had, I think there was, it's difficult because if you're in a group, the way that we organize it is we have people split up to 2 groups. That way it's smaller and more contained. And it's hard when you're the individual who has the minority opinion. So that's the only problem that I would see as far as Marist Campus goes. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure as far as where the majority of people stand as far as they're on left or right, but I think this is a good opportunity for students to express their own opinions and as well as just hear others. It's not about being right, it's about understanding.
I think to that point, I would just say that sometimes it's not the cool thing to be politically engaged on a college campus. It might not be the most attractive or appealing thing in the world to do, and that's why I think things like Red Fox Real Talk could be really conducive in sort of raising that awareness on campus and maybe offering a better platform to allow students to express themselves one way or the other.
Could you just share some of the examples of some of the issues that have kind of arisen in conversations?
From actual members.
Yep. Yeah.
Nothing out of the ordinary as far as we're not necessarily trying to create debate or arguments between people. We're the moderators in the situation, so the only things that really have occurred that I've noticed to be a problem and is basically in my group, we had students where they had the same opinion for the most part. So you go around the circle and everyone's sharing their opinions, but essentially it's just validating what they're already thinking. And in order to have a constructive conversation, you have to have these opposing views in order to advance your knowledge. If you just hear the same person over and over again, putting out the same opinion that you already have, it's simply validating you and not expanding your knowledge. So in the future, what we hope for people is to have the courage and the bravery to voice your own opinion, because especially today, you have to have the courage to speak up in order to be heard.
Yeah, I think critical opposition is something that Marist struggles with, in a sense, the student body, and sort of this fear to speak out against authority or even just to question yourself what's going on, think critically about the world around you, and I think that manifests in our sort of lack of political protests on campus as compared to other sort of progressive schools, I guess you could say. So I think it's really interesting how there's now this platform, and we'll see if students use this, I guess, to sort of express what they were afraid to say before, or if it's going to be, as you said, a sort of cycle of validation. And that, yeah, I think that's also ties in to the sports culture, and I think both of you can speak on this as well, but something that we've noticed on campus is a lack of, or potential lack of, tailgate culture for a Division I school. You would expect this whole sort of camaraderie, I guess, when it comes to sporting events. So can you guys speak on that? Do you think that Marist lacks in that department?
So I'll just start with a question for you guys. Have any of you ever been to a Marist tailgate?
I went to one.
Okay. Yeah. So I myself have never been to a Marist tailgate, and I think it kind of starts with a lot of problems that a lot of D1 schools have is they're not winning. If you're not winning, nobody wants to see it. Nobody wants to see a losing team. It's pretty easy to get behind a team that does go out and get wins. That gets fans in the stands and ultimately a better environment.
Yeah, and I would say to that point, tailgates do exist to some extent at this school, but they largely consist of parties out in the parking lot that extend well past kickoff and into the late afternoon hours. So to John's point, there is that lack of student participation, and I would agree that until the program begins to turn the corner in terms of wins and losses, you might continue to see this trend continue.
Yeah.
And it's a tough issue to grasp right now because we're really only used to this really one culture. We never really experience anything else, so there's really no parameter for us to suggest that there will be change. And that's one thing that we're going to be looking at from the Circle sports staff standpoint over the next few months.
But even just expanding beyond football, I would say that I definitely noticed a lack of attendance at the football games, with the exception of, the first game of the season, parents' weekend, alumni weekend. Otherwise, it just really seems like the ride or die fans go, and then otherwise they don't really attend. But what about the other sports like our basketball teams, our men's and women's basketball teams. Is there hope with some of the other sports programs that we have here at Marist that we could, all together become more like active and have some more pride in our sports?
So it's happened before. If you look back, you can type it on YouTube. I'm sure you'll be watching this on YouTube. If you just type in Marist versus Siena 2007, there were students lined up outside by the thousands waiting to get in because it was a nationally televised game for like first place in the MAC. So the basketball team hasn't been above 500 in 12 years. So it just takes winning, and once we get there, I'm sure the crowds will come.
What about those other sports that have successful records, I guess? Like, I would say our swimming and diving team, for example, has done exceedingly well on many different accounts, and even lacrosse. Do you think that makes a difference, I guess?
Yep, so with that, it's just those teams don't get a whole lot of exposure, unfortunately. Something we're trying to do with the sports show is obviously get some of those athletes some attention. Women's crew, we're trying to profile a student athlete on women's crew, as well as women's rugby. There's a lot of teams that are very successful at Marist, but they don't have that big name attention like football or basketball would get.
Yeah. Well, I think that's about all the time we have, but clearly there's a lot to talk about here at Marist, and I hope that we can continue being vocal about these issues. But thank you to all of our panelists. We really appreciate you guys coming on.